We are very fortunate to have them with us this afternoon. And just let you know, this is being recorded. And once we are finished, we're going to be uploading it to the International Affairs website, iafs.colorado.edu. And so you will be welcome to share it with your friends if you found the experience worthwhile. The International Affairs Board is here to offer this kind of community service to the alumni community for International Affairs program at University of Colorado. We also have a mentorship program where we connect students with alumni, and a global grants endowment where we are raising funds for international affairs students who can't afford it to have international educational experiences. We would love to participate with you on any of these ventures. And if you would like to learn more, send an email to iafs@colorado.edu and they will forward it on to me. So it's my pleasure and honor to introduce, first of all, Zainab Hussaini. Zainab is 32 years old and originally from the Bamiyan province of Afghanistan. After studying politics and international relations, she's worked as country manager for Afghanistan, managing programs and operations for Skateistan. Zainab has run an ultra marathon in China and is the first Afghan female to run a marathon in Afghanistan. She was selected as the Afghan Woman of the Year from the German-French Embassy in Afghanistan in 2016 and left Afghanistan in August 2021 after the Taliban took control of the country. She is joining us from New York. And Rory Burke. Rory is originally from Denver and attended CU Boulder from 1998 to 2003. He was a member of the school's lacrosse team, and after graduating from CU with a degree in international affairs, he worked at Chapman University as an assistant men's and women's lacrosse coach while pursuing a master's in international development before joining Skateistan in 2012. Over the last 10 years, Rory has worked with Skateistan in Cambodia, Afghanistan, South Africa, and Jordan, helping to develop the organization's new skate school and supporting the international teams to continue to deliver positive change to children through education and sports. Rory joins us this afternoon, or in his case, this morning, from South Africa. Rory and Zainab, we are so delighted that you are here with us today. And as you know, the issues in Afghanistan have maybe taken second stage to what's going on in Ukraine. That doesn't mean that there's not continuing issues that internationalists like us should be concerned about. So we'll hand the floor over to you. Thanks again for being here.
Cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think, Zainab and I are both pretty excited to be able to just speak a bit about the organization we work for, Skateistan, along with being able to talk a little background around, who we are, so it gives a little context to some of the discussion we'll have later, and talk a bit more about, the programming we've moved towards in Afghanistan, as things have changed a lot in the past year or so. Zainab and I have worked what, about 10 years almost now together? Zainab, yeah.
Yes.
In both Mazar-e Sharif and then kind of throughout the country there. So it's a pleasure to be always working with someone like Zainab. And yeah, so we kind of want to go through a little bit of information on Skateistan in general, just to give some ideas to people around who the organization is. So if you go to the next slide here. So in general, Skateistan is a international nonprofit organization, and we focus on children who are often excluded from sports and educational opportunities. So we aim for a minimum of participation of girls 50% into our programming. we have about 5% of the children in our programs are children living with disabilities. About 20% of the children we work with globally are working. So, or it's working or just into different child labor positions there. We also try to focus on refugees, children from migrant backgrounds, IDPs, that's internally displaced people, especially in somewhere like Afghanistan. There was quite a number of IDPs within our programs, and they're involved in our programs, such as our back to school programs and our Skate Create programs. And then globally, about 80% of our students come from low income backgrounds. And we primarily work with children from 5 to 17, and we do that in a few of the different locations we work. So maybe next slide. And overall, the organization's mission is empowering children through skateboarding, creative education, and the vision is to create future leaders for a better world. We do use other sports in different places along with the skateboarding, but we've seen that that's kind of our kind of niche and innovative kind of tool there, is that it's been a great way for us to leverage student participation, bringing children into the program with maybe a new sport they've never seen before, and something that kind of, what we say, kind of brings a hook to them. And that's something that maybe reaches out to children that normally maybe are shying away from other sports as well. In unique cases like Afghanistan, something like skateboarding was actually seen as something that was appropriate for girls to participate in at the time. And so that's kind of how we've been able to leverage that into, dividing this program into different places throughout the world. And go maybe to the next one. And so with this, in 2007, unofficially, the executive director and founder of the organization was living in Kabul. He actually was there for a different position and was skateboarding around the streets. There seemed to be some interest from children, and he kind of started looking and saying, oh, wow, like people are coming, kids are showing up, and that wanted to kind of, continue to provide that service. So the informal sessions there, you can see the photo here was in Macrown Fountain, which is downtown Kabul. And those were basically kind of weekly drop-up sessions, weekly pop-up sessions with children, allowing girls to participate there as well. One of the focus there at the beginning was that for every time there was a boy to skateboard, they would provide an opportunity for a girl to skateboard twice, and that to kind of start to build that in that space. And then from there, they kind of realized that there was such momentum in there that they was able to find some funding and some opportunities to open the first skate school in Kabul in 2009. So that became the first space where we had a closed facility that we could access and bring students to do skateboarding. There was classrooms there, education, programming kind of came along with that. And then on top of that, we have, the climbing wall, other sports facilities kind of in that space. With the kind of growth from there, Skateistan started expanding to Mazar-e Sharif in 2013. So that's a city in the north of Afghanistan, and then Bamyan in 2020. So that's the expansion of our Afghan project through that space. And then internationally, Skateistan started working in Cambodia in 2012, and then in South Africa in 2014. And that's when I started working for the organization in 2012 in Cambodia, and then was normally splitting time between Cambodia and Afghanistan from about 2012 to 2015 within the country there. And go maybe to the next slide there. Zainab, I think you're up here.
Yeah, in many countries, skateboarding is like just getting your board and getting outside and go to the streets and start skateboarding. But in countries such Afghanistan, it's not that much easy. And girls are not allowed to do sport, and skateboarding is a very new sport in Afghanistan. Although it's skateboarding is the biggest sport for the girls in Afghanistan right now, but still there are some restrictions for the girls, and they cannot sport in outdoor areas. So when Oliver Burke, our founder and executive director, was meeting with the girls in Kabul for the first time, and they were asking Oliver to have a private space to do skateboarding. The idea was coming to have a skate school in Kabul first, and invite girls to the skate school, to do skateboarding and start education. So the idea was coming when the girls were asking to be educated besides skateboarding and other sports. It was kind of, I can say, the situation now in Afghanistan when most of the girls are banned from going to school. It was the same story 20 years ago. When Taliban left Afghanistan, there were a lot of restriction exists in Afghanistan, and the families were thinking it's not safe or it's not appropriate for girls to go to school. So most of the girls were out of school, and most of Skateistan Kabul students were street working children. So the idea was bringing girls to a private space, to a safe space, to learn how to do skateboarding and learn. And yeah, next slide, please. Yes, and for sure, involving girls to our program was not easy, and it was not only about the restriction of the farmer government on girls and women, but it was about families as well. We had many different discussions with elders of the community, with parents, to convince them to send their girls to Skateistan to learn how to do skateboard and learn education. So we were explaining for elders of the community and the parents that we have female educators for female students, and we are going to start each session with recitation of Holy Quran, and we will just observe all the Islamic restriction they would like to see. And as well as there were a lot of female students who were not at school for many years. So we started a new program for them, which I will talk about it in the next slides.
And so, that's how we were kind of operating within Afghanistan. And that would have been with our main focus there too on what we called our back to school programming. And that was basically programming done through the Ministry of Education to help support students that were out of school or have never been to school with an accelerated learning program to re-enter school. And that was children up to the age of 14, both boys and girls. Our Skate and Create, which was probably our largest program, which was 1 hour of skateboarding or sports, and then 1 hour of creative arts-based learning, a lot of life skills built into there. And that was done through all of our spaces there, and both for boys and girls. And then we also had youth leadership. And that was also running with both boys and girls, more focused on older students, quite often having our older students participating in the classes to teach younger students as well. So almost as like an assistant kind of teacher or kind of an elder in the space, and then also life skills and different learnings for them, a bit more geared towards older students. But then along with that, within the last year, things have quite changed, as everyone probably knows, since 2021. Hey, Zainab, before everything in that point, we had what, it's about 1,500 students per week between all three sites, around there. And so we were easily about 50% girls. And as Zainab mentioned, we were probably the largest female sports organization in the country. And so things we had just opened up, or we're getting to open up our third skate school there. And then you had the fall of the Afghan government to the Taliban, and it seemed to be, it became quite a big challenge for us to figure out what's next and what's going to happen. Quite a number of our staff left the country, like Zainab did. And we have quite a number of staff that have kind of moved globally from Australia to Sweden to Belgium to the United States, Canada. And so we really were left with a little bit of a smaller staff on the ground, some more cooks or drivers of people that felt more comfortable staying there. And so we had to start to rethink our model of, how does Skateistan operate in Afghanistan? For ourselves or other programming in Cambodia and South Africa, and some of our partner programs globally, those things have kind of continued as they normally do. But with everything happening in Afghanistan, we had to rethink our model and how we can still be there, because, with the amount of people that did leave, I think that diaspora is going to be quite small in comparison to the amount of people that are still in Afghanistan and the amount of children that are still in Afghanistan that are still needing support and services and education and recreational activities. So we were basically forced to temporarily pause out of August 2021. And as of now, we've been able to restart programs in Afghanistan, and we've kind of focused on a few key areas while getting restarted is food distribution, remote classes, so not using our facilities themselves, and then also a big focus on beginning to return to our spaces there. And then further plans within the organization there is to include more programmings where we can also do stuff in different places where we have some of our staff that have left Afghanistan are now living in refugee camps, waiting to maybe potentially be in their final destination, or waiting for their long-term visas for those new locations. And they're going to be they're working to support other refugees or children in those camps as well, and different opportunities like that. So what was a pretty difficult time for just about everyone within our organization, especially our Afghan staff, just with the stress and challenges and the difficulties during that period. We've kind of been able to look back and kind of rethink about how we approach and how we continue to work and serve children in Afghanistan. So next slide. So one of the first things that we did was actually the food distribution. This has been, I think, one of the biggest needs for everyone in Afghanistan, including children and most of our students. As I mentioned, most of our students were 80% of the students globally, including Afghanistan, are from lower income. So food security is, one of the biggest challenges. And with the banking sector kind of essentially being closed, and people unable to actually, withdraw money from the bank accounts, have cash on hand and all those things that you normally would be able to do, food and access to food has been a major issue. So one of the things is that we recognized the food distribution was immediate need. And luckily on our hand, during the COVID pandemic, we had actually pivoted to some food distribution for the families as well, because that was also a big challenge at that time as well. So we had a bit of the skills in place to kind of work through shops, work through individual vendors to basically put together food packets for the students and the families. So we were able to do this for about 750 families or students and their families that were already a part of Skateistan's programming that were still there. And we did that in Bamiyan, in Kabul, and then Mazar-e Sharif, working directly through the communities to help to distribute food there. The packages did consist of basic staples to support the families, dry goods, stable goods that they could use for, hopefully for quite a long time. But that's kind of what we do with that one, with the food distribution. It was a bit more of a one-time for that massive amount, because it ends up being both extremely expensive and in terms of funding, as well as it's something that's quite a lot of logistics in there. Luckily, there are other organizations, I think, that are working to do this continually in that space. And so we'll always try to make sure that our students are linked up with organizations that are providing those as well. But that was one of the biggest needs right away we worked towards, and that we do continue to provide food to students that are involved in our community-based programs. So when they are coming to our spaces there, where we have the communities, they are able to get a meal each one of those days. So we keep it as a focus of what we're able to do, but as an organization focused on children education, the logistics and work going into providing constant food. There are some other organizations that are a bit better to prepare that and deliver that in a bigger scale. Okay, so I know you got the next one here.
In 2020, we were practicing teaching our back to school students remotely. So it was easy after the collapse of Kabul to reach out to our BTS students to teach them remotely over phone calls. And we were able to be connected just after the collapse of Kabul, and we didn't miss any of our Fortunately, we didn't miss any of our back to school students. So back to school students are from different education background. I can say they have been at the schools, at the public schools before, but because of different reasons, they had to drop out of the school, and it was because of the ongoing war in remote areas in different provinces like Jowzjan, Faryab, and they had to move to the bigger and safer cities instead, and they didn't have their support letters to enter to the public schools. And we were working with their families to obtain national IDs for them. There are ethnic group of people who are living in Afghanistan called Jugi community, which they don't have national IDs, but they were able to obtain their national ID for the first time in their history by Skateistan, and it was the first time that someone from their family were educated, especially the girls. So there were some other reasons like economy problems, poverty, and cultural issues, which they didn't allow their girls to go to school as well as boys. So we were going to the communities, talking with the elders of the community, talking with Ministry of Education to convince them to bring them back to school. And then after learning an accelerated program, which will be 2 grades in a year. After 3 years, they will be graduated from grade 6, and they will be registered to the grade 7. And we will have 2 years of follow-up with them. And the good thing right now is Taliban say that the girls are not allowed to go to school from grade 6. And it means the girls who are turning their 12 years old, they are banned from going to school. But in our back to school program or accelerated program, we have students who are 13 and 14, which means a kind of play game, and they can stay with the programs at Skateistan. Although they are not coming to the skate school facilities except Bamiyan Skate School, but we do have our local classes in IDP camps in Mazar Sharif and in Kabul, and they are coming regularly to their lessons, and they are receiving a meal during the day, and we are providing them free transportation. Next slide, please.
And one thing to note too, I don't think we talked about it here, but that was the focus on the back to school was actually the content for the film, Learning to Skateboard in a War Zone, which won an Oscar and a BAFTA in, I think it was 2019. That was based on our programming there. So I think it was on A&E, might be something people can find. It was out there, but I think we're pretty proud of, we didn't make that film ourselves, but if you want to see a bit more an in-depth look at the type of back to school programming that we were working on and that we still continue to do today, that's a really great way to do that, because it's mostly the students and staff kind of discussing that program there. And so, but back to what we're working on now is that one of the other big things for us is looking to see about how to regain access and the restart of programs in our skate schools. We did mention at the beginning that the children were asking for a safe place, somewhere where they could go to be where off the streets to participate in sports and education. And so we've kind of found that as having a school space that was their own, something that we could, that was a great way to provide it. So this is a photo of our newest one in Bamiyan, which actually was finished, through the pandemic and then, during the Taliban take over the government. And this is actually one of our first sessions there with some boy students there in Bamiyan as well. So, but with the restart of our skate schools, the hope and Bamiyan one that we're running right now is that we want to be able to provide that space for students, a safe place. And also there's quite a lot more work we can do with students when you have them in a kind of a captive environment where they can have, be in a classroom and be kind of in a space where there's teachers and a lot of positive adults around them. Unfortunately, at this time for the sports, it is only boys being allowed to do sports. Right now, girls are not allowed to do sports at that level. But we are able to run our back to school classes, as Zainab was mentioning, up to age 12 or 14 in those locations, as well as we can do some, what we've always worked is splitting our programming. So one day would be for boys, one day is for girls, but now we can kind of split that to do more vocational training for our female students and actually their mothers. So we're starting to reach out in the community a little bit more, and with that vocational training, we're able to provide work around tailoring, food processing, digital literacy, and trying to find ways to work around maybe some of the restrictions around education, and get creative in how we continue to use our spaces to work with our students. One of the other things that has been very difficult in kind of regaining access to the spaces is that with the changing government, essentially most of the ministries, they all are in the same place. So the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Economy, all of these government agencies you would work with are still in place, and the same essential mechanisms are in place to obtain your permissions and obtain what to do. The challenge is that there's a lot of new actors in there. And with that being in place, they might not always be actors that are civil servants that are, they might be new to some of these roles. And so one of the challenges, for ourselves and organizations across the country is basically regaining access to your spaces. Whether there's aspects of taxation or aspects of, people maybe questioning the mandate for the type of program that you're doing, those things seem to be going a little bit slower. And so that's something we are continually working through with our staff that's on the ground now in Afghanistan. And it's also something we're working in each place a little bit differently. Throughout the country, I think the government is much more fragmented than it ever was. And so, parties that are in Kabul maybe are not responsible for ones that are in Mazar, and maybe not responsible for ones that are in Bamyan, in the locations that we work. So we are working kind of, consistently about, regaining access in all of our different spaces, and also what we can do in those spaces, because what might happen in each one, we might be able to do a little bit more in certain places than others, depending on the community and, what the local government is starting to allow there. So that's been taking up quite a lot of the work for us, but it does seem to be something that we are getting ground on. And as Zainab mentioned, we have been beginning our BTS programming in our space in in Bamyan, as well as we were, I think, planning to reopen in Mazar-i-Sharif relatively soon to have more of our BTS students into that sort of space. And the other good part about bringing children into the space is that even when with the new government that's in place, when they come to the space and they see children in the space and making the space theirs, it makes it much easier to state your case that what we're doing is correct by the Sharia law or correct by the type of programming that's allowed, and that we try to have our space open to show that what we're doing is approved by the government, but also is something that is approved by the community, and that there's a big community support around that as well. So the more we have that community support, that pushes us to open up our spaces, and having the students there and their families and elders in the community supporting what we're doing, that starts to give us a lot more traction and buy-in with the government and for helping to continue to have negotiated access for our spaces. Next slide.
As we mentioned, many of our staff were evacuated from Afghanistan in, I guess, 2021. And when they resettled on their final destination in different countries, they were able to help with us to start skateboarding programs for Afghan refugees who were waiting for their final destination, and in US, the students who were already resettled in Rochester. So here in Rochester, we start skateboarding and create a program for a group of Afghan girls and boys, which was just finished at the beginning of June. And there are some other skateboarding programs which is running in Europe, in Germany, in Belgium, and Sweden. Am I missing any country, Rory?
I think for the refugee ones, that's most of where it's at. But yeah, I think that's it. And I think, about how many students are in the Rochester program right now?
Yeah, we had around 20 students, equal boys and girls were participating in our programs. And we are going to expand the program to the summer programs for them, partnering with different organizations here in Rochester.
And that's something that we've seen is a bit beneficial. We have some former staff in different locations, and they are in those, those spaces, or they maybe are in a camp, and they're, I think, Zainab, you could probably talk a bit more about, that transition of being in a space and also trying to find things to do to keep occupied, and, and also seeing that, there are children in those spaces, they are allowing us to do some sort of programming there. And so really trying to, continue to kind of give back and work through those as well. I think that if there's about 20 in the program there, I think it's about the same at the spaces in Belgium, in Germany, and in Sweden. They're much smaller numbers. And what we see is that over time, it's a bit of transitory, so that, the students are there for a certain amount of time, and then they're maybe moving on to what would be a final destination, or if that's their final destination, they're involved there while they're going into school. I noticed we had some discussions around some of the programming. I think it was in Belgium, is that, we've kind of shifted to a bit more of like much more creative, much more fun activities programming, because they are in school during the daytime. And that when they come to the Skateistan programming after school, they're looking for something a little more lively and a little more of like a traditional after school program. Whereas maybe sometimes our programming in Afghanistan would be a bit more traditional, filling in some roles for children that are maybe not in the school system, or maybe really lacking an ability to access the different types of like more formal education in that space. So.
Yeah, Rory, I remember that we do have programs in Albania as well.
Yeah, okay. So it's quite a lot. And I think we had, at the time, was about, probably almost 50 to 60 staff, to include part-time staff, Zainab. And I would say, a majority of them have left the country. And so they are in a lot of different locations throughout the world. And that's, some have moved on to more, as I mentioned, formal residence, and some are still in these areas, and they're able to like either go back and into the camp areas and run the programming, or they're maybe still living in those spaces there as well. So, and then so from that side too, within the organization, like, that's kind of in a nutshell of where we are right now working in Afghanistan. As I did mention, our programs in Cambodia and South Africa are still kind of moving along and doing the same type of programming that they normally do. But we really had to take a big shift and really kind of relook at, how we can continue to provide programming in Afghanistan, how we can continue to best serve, the children that are there. As I mentioned that, with so many people leaving, there still are, millions of children that are going to be, much more at risk than they ever have been, due to food security, due to access to education, due to, all these different things that are happening. I think luckily for the time being, security-wise, it is probably the best security or the most stable security climate in probably the last 20 years. There isn't quite as much of attacks or fighting in provincial areas. And we have seen some of our BTS students have gone back to areas where they're originally from, because now there really isn't fighting around throughout the country. That being said, no one really knows how long that might hold for. There's always discussions that there might be some challenges like in the future, depending on what continues to happen with the economic situation in Afghanistan. But overall, our aim is that we've been in Afghanistan for over 10 years. Our aim is to be there as long as we possibly can, even working through within a new government and trying to figure out how best to continue to serve children in Afghanistan with the programs that we have. And if you want to know a bit more about Skateistan, you can always check out skateistan.org. That's our website there. We also are pretty active on social media. So Twitter or Instagram and Facebook, it's going to be @Skateistan. And if you're interested in ways to help, easiest way is to donate. We have donation pages, donation links right on our webpage there. It's kind of one of the first things we put onto there for people that are interested in being, maybe a little bit more than a one-time donation. We have a citizen. So what that is, asking a $10 a month to help us reach, all the students that we work with globally. And in that case, there also is some like things that get added into that as a citizen of like, it's a shirt or some things like that. And those are trying to get that kind of routine donor coming through. And then also more than anything is also telling people about, the work that we do. I think we got really lucky with having an Oscar award-winning film made about the organization that really did, show to a lot of people, and it's an easy way to share those things. But quite a lot of the support that we receive, whether it ends up being down the line from a link up to an embassy that maybe wants to support, or individuals who are just continue to share the word. But if it's something that you're interested in, share the ideas with people, tell them about the organization, and that stuff really kind of does go a long way. So, and that's the last one there. Yeah, so from our side, we just wanted to, for the folks that are here on the call, to thank you for taking an interest in Skateistan and hearing a little bit about Zainab and I's experience there. And we're also here for a little bit to answer any questions about the organization, about working in Afghanistan, and anything else you maybe want to ask around CU from my side, or maybe Afghanistan directly. Zainab is originally from there as well. I think I see one here in the chat.
Yeah, our first question is coming in. If and how does Skateistan staff maintain contact with Afghanistan students that are now in refugee camps?
So, Zainab, you want to take that?
Yeah, our staff in Berlin, they are out of the refugee camps, but they have access to the refugee camp. They can go during the week there and teach skateboarding. And in Albania, we do have 2 of our farmer staff who are at the same refugee camp. They are waiting to be moved to Canada. So they are in direct contact with the students there. There are other Afghan refugees and children. And in Belgium as well, our farmer staff, Mubaraka Mohammadi, she was living in a refugee camp, and she was in direct contact with the students. But in Afghanistan, our back to school students, they are living in internally displaced people camps, which is a community, and everyone has access.
I have a follow-up question. It's incredible how much you have achieved in the last year and the conditions that have been imposed upon the organization. Is there something in your framework that you attribute as the way that you've been able to, effectively continue the mission?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say to that is that, like, I think, from an international perspective of, working in Afghanistan and in a lot of other countries, is that the organization has been, extremely adaptive, I think, since as long as I've worked there. And so there's always quite a bit of flexibility to say, cool, how can we get this done? I think a lot of times we're maybe sometimes not so stuck in that, this is the only way to do things. I think COVID taught us a lot, actually, around how to work in new ways, because same thing, our staff could go and maybe work from home, but the students are now in spaces where they couldn't come into our locations, the support they normally would be getting. So it's a very tricky thing. So we had to kind of rethink that. And I think that there's a bit within the organization there that, we really kind of have always been adaptable. And I would say, Zainab, working in Afghanistan, you always have to be adaptable in everything. I think the context itself is just extremely challenging, because however you plan to get something done, you start the day off saying we're going to go from A to B to C, and you're going to take, a left, a right, and then everything else. So you have to be extremely adaptive. And I think that from that side, I think the fact that the organization, started there in Afghanistan, and that was kind of the ethos from the beginning of just like, hey, just figure out ways to get it done. That's kind of played its way through to, where we are now. And that kind of really allows some kind of flexibility and really able to quickly, like, pivot and move into something else that, that works to support it. But it's, yeah. I think that's probably the easiest way. And we're not a huge organization. I think with our Afghan staff, when we were fully staffed there, we were maybe close to about 100 staff, if you include part-time staff there. And now we're probably about like 60 or so. So it is a little bit, we're not so massive that we just can't move and kind of change things up there. If that makes sense.
Zainab, you have a fascinating background, professionally, educationally, sports-wise. I'm curious if you were given an opportunity that allowed you to achieve what you have, and that inspired what your profession has been to work with Skateistan.
Yeah, my story actually was started on 2013 when I was working with Women for Women International, and our project was ended in Mazar Sharif, and I was searching for a job, and I was a university student. And that time I was going to university during night shift, which is common in Afghanistan. People have to work, and then during the night they are going to university. And I was searching some job search websites, and I was seeing a picture of skateboarding for the first time. It was my first time when I was 22 or 23. It was my first time seeing a skateboarding picture, and I found that they are in need of a sport coordinator. And when I was in Iran, I was born in Iran as a refugee. And as I didn't have legal documents, I was not able to go to the Taekwondo club. And when I came to Afghanistan, I went to the Taekwondo club, and the police came. It was just right after the collapse of the former regime, when Taliban were out of Afghanistan, and the new regime were coming, Hamid Karzai. And I was thinking, oh, now I'm in my own country, and I'm able to do sport, the sport I like. But unfortunately, the police came, and they shut down the club, because they were thinking sport is not for the girls, especially Taekwondo. So I was thinking this is the right job for me, because I was always pushed back from playing sports. And my journey just started as a sport coordinator, and I was able to learn many sports within a Skateistan program myself. And going to the international ultra marathon race, it was an opportunity provided by Skateistan, and for sure, without being a part of Skateistan, it was not possible for me.
Wow. And here we have another question. Does the program provide any opportunities for the students to connect with the students the program has in Cambodia and South Africa? Any opportunities to do virtual connections, perhaps with people who are going to watch this presentation or who are participating right now?
Yeah, Zainab, you probably know a little bit more, but how we would do that stuff with was a Global Girl Project and some of these other partners. So we quite often work with different partners, different NGOs and different partners as well. And we've always had some different things. Language barriers is always a bit of a challenge because maybe some of our students in Afghanistan, Dari is their main language, and maybe a second language is maybe Tajik or Uzbek or something. And in Cambodia it's Khmer and stuff. So we do some, but it was mostly through a little more specialized programs, like we did one with the Global Girl program. Maybe what are some of the other ones? Maybe some of the youth leadership stuff that Zainab that we did, where the students connected with each other.
Yeah, we did have some partnership. Actually, I mean a virtual partnership with Global Nomads Group.
Yeah.
And Global Girls Project.
Yeah. So it'd be usually like a smaller cohort of students that are involved in that, and that they would maybe be working on similar projects. So maybe a similar community project that they would then do sharing and things like that. So we do use those opportunities there to provide that stuff. I think right now we're probably not doing much of that at all within Afghanistan. But that doesn't mean that in the future, when things start up again, or when we have a bit more a bit more clarity and a bit more of a secure space where we can do that, where there's going to be an internet connection in our spaces where the students can be there, that there's going to be opportunities maybe to collaborate kind of in that space. One thing we do is at the international staff level. So like our staff from Afghanistan, Cambodia, South Africa, they're quite often meeting, once every week or a couple of weeks at different levels to discuss these kind of similarities and themes. We do try to contextualize our programming as much as possible. So, our programs officers and our educator teams in each of those countries are developing the curriculums, but they're maybe sharing a lot of techniques around how to deliver that to the students. Stuff, maybe we'll do some group trainings and stuff like that. So those are the areas we try to do sharing as well within the staff. And when we can, bringing people in person, we've brought some of the staff to different locations to do trainings and support and stuff like that around child protection or things like that. And those are themes that, we can do a lot of work together in a group and that kind of address of, for example, what child protection means in all the communities that we work and where those similarities and stuff like that.
Zainab, do you and your colleagues have plans to return to Afghanistan? And if so, under what conditions?
Yeah, good question. Yes. If the situation gets better, but not under control of this government, because everyone knows that they are against women and women who are working and women who are working for women's rights, like me. And I will not be safe under that government. But if the government change and Democrat regime come to the lead again, yes, I will go back to my country and serve for my people.
And are most of your colleagues of the same mindset? Do they plan to do the same thing?
I'm not sure.
Understood.
Hey, Zainab, as I say, do you know of anyone that's even tried to go back, or any thoughts right now, or has even looked into it?
Not right now. None of us tried to go back, or none of us even asked to go back, because we are hearing that Taliban are killing people who work for NGOs, who work for the National Army, which I myself, I have my cousins and my uncles who were a member of National Army. And it's the same for many of our colleagues. Each of them at least have one member of their family who worked with the National Army, with the previous government. And as well as the big reason that's why we didn't ask is, if we go back to Afghanistan, we don't have a job. Yeah. Which is very important.
Beyond supporting Skateistan, are there things that people who'll be watching this can do to help the people of Afghanistan from afar?
Yeah, I think Taliban are right now, they are putting pressure on the world to recognize them. And they're using the girls and women of Afghanistan, and they're banning the girls to go to school. And everyone knows that it's just a tool to use them as a pressure. And me as an Afghan woman, I want the world to not recognize them, even if it sacrifices the education of girls. And I want the international actors to come and advocate for the girls and women to send them back to schools and open the schools again in Afghanistan.
Given I would also say,
go ahead.
I would just say quickly on that too, is that there is now quite a lot of Afghan diaspora. Actually, somebody I think saw the presentation that's happening today and reached out to the organization. I think they're based in Denver, about there's some refugee communities that are there. So that's also another way that to support is that, there probably are communities and programs that are supporting, these newly arrived refugees into the States, and maybe into other locations that some of people are on the call are, but, depending on what the capacity is, or, or how to support, but can always reach out to those organizations and seeing how to best kind of like, welcome them into the communities, welcome them into, being in these new spaces is extremely, extremely difficult to be moving from one country to the next, but also under the conditions and how fast that happened, and how things went down, where a lot of people had to leave, almost everything behind. And so, there's quite a lot of organizations in probably every community that are welcoming Afghan refugees. And so getting in touch with them and seeing, what they can do to help, whether it's, things like that. So there's always opportunities there as well, I recommend.
Is Afghanistan an all hands on deck situation for Skateistan right now, where maybe your colleagues who have been focused on other countries are focusing on what they can do in Afghanistan, or does Skateistan have further expansion plans that are also in the works right now and to other geographic areas?
Yeah, so taking the latter point first, is we do have some planning, and we have quite a lot of other things kind of happening as well. So we've been working on being incorporated as an NGO in Jordan, and we actually been working with a partner there for about 1.5 years, and looking at, there's always a few spaces to look at where we will be the main implementer of the programming at some point. So having our skate schools and that's always a bit of a plan. But we also have a few other avenues that we work with, other organizations through small granting and support for them to run programming in Kenya and Bolivia, Iraq, some of the locations we're supporting programs to run stuff there. So we are looking at different ways to expand. We're maybe not just having a big footprint in that space, but then also maybe, can we support, smaller community-based organizations that are looking to kind of either build in some sports and education programming, or have something happening on their own and sort of support them in those ways. So we're always looking to expand a bit. And I think the next one, biggest one that we're spending a lot more time on is Jordan, just because it takes a long time for the registration process for to be an international organization. And there's quite a big need for refugees and communities in that space as well. For the all hands on deck for Afghanistan, I think there's some select kind of international team members that have a bit more expertise and focus. So, Zainab and myself and a couple other people that have worked there for quite a long time and are a bit more focused on that, and that trying to do what we can. We are small and kind of building back up. And so, the organization internationally is kind of split. So we have our main departments, but it's a bit more focused on, how to support best in those ways. It was definitely all hands on deck for almost the entire organization in August and September, with supporting the evacuation. So that was, all of our Afghan team and almost all of our international team, running 24-hour shifts pretty much to figure out, how to keep people safe and what was next. There was a lot of uncertainty at that time. But right now it's a bit more focused on how are we, using the expertise we have to, work with our staff that's on the ground, some newly hired staff there, to liaise with the government to get things started, to, work with some of our staff like Zainab who've left, or former programs officer, Norzai, who are then kind of helping out on a more, tighter Afghan specific basis. And so we are working kind of, pretty focused on it, but we wouldn't be saying it's all hands on deck now because we are small and kind of growing back up in that space.
As we are reaching the top of the hour, my final question is, after so many years of conflicts that have been escalating more recently, what gives you hope for Afghanistan and for Skateistan in Afghanistan?
I hope at first the situation gets better for women and girls, and generally for the people of Afghanistan, as the main issue right now in Afghanistan is food security and insecurity, and target killings, honor killings. And I hope all these things stop in some point. And I hope democratic government, which our leader or our president come by election, not by force and not by choice of other countries.
I think, one thing is, one of the reasons I think we've always worked in Afghanistan too, is that there's so many, such a young population. I think the amount under the age of 25 is, in the millions. And those people will be growing up, those young people will be growing up, under this, new regime. And what's going to happen is, we don't know, but the hope is that, opportunities through, different organizations that are continuing to work there, that are continue to, provide, the support that children need, are able to continue to operate, and kind of fill that space where the government really can't, because they're pretty inefficient right now. And that there are opportunities for kids to continue to learn, and that, it is such a large population, much larger when they were in charge the first time in the 1990s. I think it's probably like tripled, from about like 10 or 15 million, I think at the time, to about, I think it's almost 40 million in Afghanistan now. So I think there is a little bit of hope that, there is maybe some underlying kind of like groundswell that over time can change. I think, for the immediate, it's pretty unsettling to what, all the stuff that Zainab was saying, but, maybe over time it's about, chipping away with, such a massive young population that might start to demand different things there. And that takes, education, that takes time. And I think, and a lot of patience in that space. So I would say in the near future, it's going to be pretty hard, but I could think that, things are going to change maybe over time as well.
Well, Zainab and Rory, thank you for the important work that you're doing in Afghanistan and elsewhere. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us today and educate us on what you're doing and what's going on in Afghanistan. And we wish you all the best.
Yeah.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for everyone who attended.